Hello, good morning all of you. I have already given the framework of my course. I am just repeating the same, just like intellectual property rights and its importance is felt by the country, policymakers, international bodies, and say in respect of academics and industry in reference to collaboration and others. So, on that premises, I will have given the overview of my course that will tell about intellectual property creation, transaction, management, all those aspects. So, now I will start my first lectures with reference to basics of intellectual property rights. Okay. Why intellectual property rights, what it is, and say what is the theoretical justification behind these forms of rights, everything I will try to cover. Along with I will give an introduction about the different forms of law that may required for a learner of this course, along with maybe a lay persons who are in a technology domains. Okay. So, let us see, I will start with in the class 1 with the basics of intellectual property per se. Okay. So, what do you mean by information or information goods? Just like say consider every day a news channel provides some information. A child draw a painting or child draw some curve, that may also derive some information. So, information may be considered, or information you may tell that as information goods. Okay. Just like say information goods in economic sense that told that we do not know the value when we create, but it will generate the value by virtue of prolonged use or in near futures. So, let us say on that premises you know the value of intellectual property in the present economical context. Just like say if you read the newspaper, even today's newspaper, you will see that American government has now initially they were telling that okay, Indian intellectual property systems is not as per the international standard. Now, they are praising the intellectual property systems of India. So, you are understanding that in respect of international negotiations and other aspects also, intellectual property is also important. And you know that intellectual property per se everyday newspaper or any other reports, you also see that okay, that a particular pharma giant and have created something in a particular country, and say they are some other pharma giants trying to make some pirated things out of that. Everything you have heard from say if you keep your eyes and ear open from the newspaper, TV channels, just like Economic Times and say telegraphs, that business news part will highlights about the intellectual property, but you may not know what is the hidden agenda remains within the word intellectual property per se. Okay. So, let us see how can I be able to give some information, give some say give some thing about the intellectual property to a beginners. Okay. Let us see, Mr. Tom is a person who is sitting behind a tree or besides a tree, and he is thinking. Okay. First he thought about, let us say you know everybody knows the Einstein's equation E is equal to mc square. He thought about why c is equal to c square, means n value is 2. So, he thought about why not put c is x and makes x as variable with reference to c. Just like if I consider let us say E is equal to mc to the power x, or for a particular value of c, say x is equal to say up to 2 into 10 to the power 9, x is let us say 1.5, where if c is greater than 2 into 10 to the power 9, so x is let us say 2 and 2 to 3. So, like this way he thought about an equation. So, that is create a modification of present Einstein's say present that equations, okay, the energy mass relationships equations. So, now for a persons like you and me, what it is? It is per se is also providing some information. For a lay person, it will ultimately providing, let us say, like a E is equal to egg, m is equal to something like this way, but say somehow who can have a little bit knowledge with reference to the particular subject matter, he will ultimately able to know E means he is trying to state about that Einstein's equations, m is trying to state about that equation, mass, c is about the velocity of lights. So now the particular things he has created, I may consider it is per se information. In economic sense, sometimes we call that information goods. Okay. So, now that that information goods, so he do not know what may be the future outcome from this particular relationship E is equal to mc to the power x. So, we consider that as information or information goods. So, he created one that equation 1, let us say E is equal to mc to the power x. Now, subsequently he was thinking about, okay, say we run bike, we also say others motor vehicles and others, we use some sorts of liquid. Okay. So, what the can be the chemical formula of that liquid, or he has some knowledge about that liquid chemical formula, and later on he again generated something that have formula different from existing liquid people are using. So, he has created a formula, let us say C8 H10 N4 O2. Okay. This is also some sorts of informations or information goods in economic sense, because this also by virtue of creation is not providing any kinds of return that will ultimately generate the returns or value in near future by virtue of use. Okay. Mr. Tom say created something in energy domain, he created something in some information. So, he created some information in let us say energy domain, he created some information in again energy, but liquid form of energy domain. So, now he is also creative and imaginative. So, now he is thinking about, okay, liquid, for liquid we require some containers. So, he is thinking about what type of containers will give some sorts of say lucrative appearance to the prospective customer, consumer or users. So, based on that he has ultimately designed a bottle. So, that is also bottle per se is also providing some information to the person, and also he for him he does not know the value in virtue of creation, and it will also return the value by virtue of use. Okay. So, subsequently he also just like say consider a logo for just like say based on his creative imaginative thought, he has created a logo. Okay. So, now that logo also by virtue of creation has nothing but only providing some information. So, okay. So, that way that all of his Mr. Tom's creations is providing some sorts of information, and in economic sense we call them as information goods. Why information goods? Because they are per se by virtue of creation is not providing any value, but that have future potential to generate value. Okay. So, Mr. Tom's creation have providing information that have characteristic of information goods. So, now you know the nature of informations. Information is difficult to create. Mr. Tom is sitting behind the tree or besides the tree for every day, have been sitting beside the tree every day and thinking, and by virtue of his thought process, he created those kinds of information and information goods that takes a long time, long efforts, a long thinking process, but that things, whether how that thing can be a valuable assets, that there lies the role of intellectual property rights. So, now if you consider any information, if you that like a news or others that have characteristics that people who has created, he has given a lot of efforts, but now person who will ultimately get that information, he can make a copy, n number of copies out of it. So, its nature is difficult to create, but easy to duplicate or triplicate like this way. So, nature of E is equal to mcx, he has created mcx, but another person can easily copy that equation, another person copy that formula, another person copy that bottle, another person copy that logo, whatever Mr. Tom has put up effort to create. So, that way that okay, Mr. Tom is thinking about what he will do with all sorts of his creation, whether he will put those information considering its nature in the form of a public goods, or he can generate revenue out of his creation. So, how that can be achieved? So, informations if I consider in the form of a public good, so public goods are non-rival, non-excludable. So, what do you mean by just like a public good? Public goods, you are telling non-rival in or let us say non-rival, non-excludable. So, public good is a function of non-rival and non-exclusivity. So, what do you mean by that? So, if I consider let us say oxygen, air or news. So, similarly, E is equal to mcx, that formula. So, if Mr. Tom is created, Mr. X can use that information, Mr. Y can use that information, Mr. Z can use that information if it is in the form of a public good. So, there will be no rivalry with reference to the use of the creation of Mr. Storm if it is in the form of a public good. So, there will be no rivalry between Mr. X, Mr. Y, Mr. Z who are per se using the information generated or created by Mr. Storm if it is in the form of a information's public goods. Okay. So, public goods means there is no rivalry, there is no exclusivity within that part. So, what the creation I told you, the creation by nature is in the form of an information, or that information have a characteristics of a public good. If it is not been given some sorts of, we not create some sorts of mechanisms or tools to ultimately convert that in the form of others. So, Mr. Tom can think about that those creation in the form of a public good, or he can think about that okay, that creation in the form of property rights. Okay. The property rights things I will explain in the next class in details, but let us say property rights means whatever the public good, non-rival, non-excludable, but property rights have the characteristics of, property rights has the characteristics of, let us say I am writing a characteristics of, say again I am putting as the functions of let us say exclusivity and ownership, ownership. So, property rights has the characteristics of exclusivity, means Mr. Tom, if he thinks that EMCX is his property rights, then he can exclude other to use that that creations, and he has ownership over that creation, just like E is equal to mc to the power x, C8H10N4O2, bottle and others. So, that his creation can have characteristics of information, public good, but if we established some sorts of rights over those creations in the form of exclusivity and ownership, then he can thought about some thought about some return out of those. Okay. So, now whatever the creation he has developed or made, that has say some value, that have some use. Definitely you cannot ignore the value or use of those information that Mr. Tom has created when he was sitting besides the tree. And everybody knows the story of Newton. He was sitting besides the apple tree, and he found suddenly the apple has been falling from tree instead of going upward. Then he started iteration over that, and ultimately he established that we know everybody that was he has developed we got the Newton's law out of that thought process. Okay. So, now like this way, if that Mr. Tom can think about, he will put that EMCX in the form of a public good, then what will be the problem? He will not able to exclude others with reference to the use of that. He may not get benefit out of those. Okay. So, everybody can use that. So, but he can thought about, I can establish ownership over that, that will ultimately give some sorts of return with reference to his creation, because by virtue of that he will able to exclude others to use that information whatever he created using his imaginative, creative, inventive ingenuity that have embedded within himself. Okay. So, property rights in the form of an say exclusivity or ownership, he may thought about, I can establish property rights over my creation in the form of exclusivity and ownership. So, just the exclusivity and ownership, I can explain little bit on that part. Ownership, say ownership means he is Mr. X is only owner, or Mr. Tom is only owner. Mr. Tom is only owner with reference to those creation what I told, having the characteristic of information, public goods, all sorts of things. Okay. So, if he excludes others, then what will happen? He will ultimately, he will himself will use those sorts of equation. Okay. E is equal to MC square, he will use that information. So, now if he use for himself, the question lies that whether the society will get benefit out of that creation. Okay. He is himself using for his research purpose or his students research purpose, but there is no dissemination of those information outside. So, there is also exclusivity, there is also ownership. So, then again the problem, what is problem? Maybe society will not get appropriate benefit out of the Mr. Tom's creations. Why? Because he himself is using, public has not have knowledge about those kinds of informations, whatever he has been creating over the years. Okay. So, then there lies ultimately the problem that society is not getting benefit out of those creations. Okay. So, that way that property rights, although exclusivity, ownership, but what sorts of property rights will be beneficial for these kinds of creations. So, there lies the role of intellectual property. Okay. So, now say intellectual property, we can consider that I told you Mr. Tom is sitting besides the tree, then we call them as such. There is no legal definitions available for intellectual property or intellectual property rights. We consider that as creation of minds. So, by virtue of creation of minds, why I am telling that mind created E is equal to MCX X, created that formula, that bottle, that logo. So, I can consider that information or public goods whatever we created, that is considered as creation of minds. Creation of minds having the nature of public goods, but public good, if I put that in the form of public good, what will happen? Mr. Tom may not get any benefit, but whether society will get proper benefit out of that, there lies the questions. Okay. Why lies the questions? There lies the question because let's say if I put in the public goods ideology, everybody knows that people are thinking about open source software versus proprietary software. Now there is the economics are trying to do a research which will be the appropriate mechanism for software per se, let's say open source or proprietary basis, all those kinds of things. So that way, that is the questions, that whether in the form of intellectual property in the form of public goods will be beneficial, or we can give in the form of some property rights. What I told, mean exclusivity or ownership is the component within the purview of property rights. So they are ultimately the trade-off between the public good versus private rights or property rights. That trade-off lead to the formation of intellectual property, formation or creation of intellectual property rights systems. If you know, just like say from age-old practice, if you consider that intellectual property rights systems was there even in past, just like say when people are thinking about some creation and they are thinking about how can I get benefit, or how that a society or say they say some institution can can create further creation of minds. So on that mechanism, if you know that, if I can tell a story regarding that, just like say Queen Elizabeth's time, his chef prepared a nice dish for her. Then that she was thinking about that, okay, that his chef has prepared the nice dish, but okay, so now he has prepared for one times, whether he will be happy to prepare that thing for a number of times. Then he thought about, no, maybe if I create some mechanism by virtue of which I give some sorts of rights over his creation for maybe for a very limited period of times, then maybe he will be interested further for his creations or for his preparation of that particular kinds of dishes. So he has given some limited period rights over that particular varieties of dishes to that chef, and chef was also happy. Why she was happy? Okay, because the rights over that kinds of preparation have been provided only to that chef for a particular period of time. So he was happy, and queen was also happy. So see that now in this situation, the who is preparing the dishes, he is also happy, and the queen, who is the user of that dishes, he is also happy. So that they found, okay, if I create that type of mechanism by incentive in the form of exclusivity, then both the party, means let us say creators is happy, the users is also happy, and they are getting the creator will create further new things, and users will get the better quality of things, better performance product. So on that premises, that a property rights justification lies on creation of minds. But now ultimately the question, another say the liberalist people was thinking about the property rights, whether we will put that property rights like in the form of a natural rights, or say in the form of a perpetual rights, or we can put the property rights for a limited period of time, because they are fear of the thing that, okay, Mr. X has given the property rights over his creation, just like a ownership over that creation. Okay, so now what he will do? He is the owner, he will exclude others with reference to his creation, then he will ultimately regulate the market. Why he will regulate the market? He will try to get maximum benefit out of his creation. So he will try to increase the cost of say CX, C8, H10, N4O2, whatever he has created or invented. Okay. So if I give a perpetual rights over that, then he will ultimately get a benefit out of his creations. So, for that reason they are thinking about that property rights in the form of limited periods rights. So, okay. So, now let us conclude about the basics of intellectual property rights. Okay. This is creation of minds. By nature it is say in the form of information goods or public goods by virtue of his nature. Why I am telling you by virtue of nature? Because it is easy, it is say the value I do not know. So, it is difficult to exclude. Okay. But now I have to derive benefit out of that particular creation of minds. So, there lies the justification of ownership, exclusivity. So, in the form of a property rights. So, so I can consider that intellectual property means creation of minds, and on the creation of minds I will give some sorts of limited period exclusive right to the creator for the benefit of the creators and for the benefit of the society. Okay. So, I think you got some idea with reference to the intellectual property and its basics. Next class I will discuss about the property rights and the various laws. Okay. Thank you for today's class.